Hello once again, everybody. Thank you for joining me here on this Thursday, December 10th edition of ATS Radio. I'm your host, Adam Burke. I'll be joined today by professional bettor and handicapper Brad Powers from bradpowersports.com. All things college football for week 15, all things NFL for week 14 coming up here on today's show. All things college basketball, college football, and NFL over at ATS.io for you to check out. Lots of picks and predictions for you. Lots of industry news, sportsbook promotions, a lot of good stuff out there in the industry here for this week, and a lot more good stuff coming as we get closer to the weekend. So I encourage you to check out all of those sections over at ATS.io. And make sure you download the ATS app as well, which you can find in the Google Play Store, in the Apple Store, or you can find direct links to download those over at ATS.io. Go to the ATS app page on your mobile device, click the button for, or push on the button for the Google Play Store or the Apple Store. It'll take you right to the app in those two platforms, so you can download that. Start using that. It's a bet tracker, an odds screen, stats, trends, standings database, all kinds of great stuff in that app. And also the opportunity to buy some premium model selections from an analytics feed as well. So check that out in the ATS app, in the Google Play Store, and also in the Apple Store. A lot of good content this week on ATS Radio so far. If you missed anything, you can find it over at the website, or just go ahead and subscribe to the shows here on Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, wherever you stream and download your podcast content. With that, we bring on today's guest. That is professional bettor and handicapper Brad Powers from bradpowersports.com. And Brad, how's it going today, man?
Going well. Good to hear your voice on this fine Thursday.
Good to chat with you as well, buddy. And, normally at this time of the year, we're talking Army, Navy, and we're talking bowl preparation. And this year we're not. We're talking about a continuation of the regular season and then more regular season plus conference championships and a bowl game next weekend. It's definitely a lot different than usual.
Yeah, usually at this point in the season, we're down to maybe 40 games left, counting bowls and Army, Navy. And, now we got 40 plus games this week alone. So, not having games, so many games in September now, we're trying to finish out the season here. And it's different, I can tell you that. But more games equals more opportunities to bet, more opportunity to find value, more opportunity, hopefully, to make some money.
Well, of course, there are a lot of things to be uncertain about here this week. COVID's still kind of all over the place, and that's just the uncertainty we've been dealing with over the course of the season. But another rash of opt-outs here this week. And I think, as we look at regular season finales for teams that really aren't going anywhere, don't have any bowl tie-ins, anything like that, it's sort of a guessing game this week to decide, which teams will show up and which teams won't.
Absolutely. And I think you used the right word, guessing game, because, you can have, an educated guess and a hypothesis on who do you think is going to be motivated or not. But one thing is for certain, we're going to see some teams wave the white flag. I think we've seen a few already this season. I think we're going to start seeing a lot more starting on Saturday. But with that being said, your guess is as good as mine to pick out those teams. You have context clues, key players opting out and whatnot. And you can do, teams with interim coaches already, teams that are looking to build upon maybe some success that they've had already this year. There's context clues, but even then, Texas last week had 2 senior captains opt out. And what do? They go put 69 points on the board against Kansas State and play arguably one of their best games of the season. So again, your guess is as good as mine on a lot of these.
Yeah, and that was a Texas team. I think they had, 10 yards per play last week against a Kansas State team that, has been dropping in a lot of people's power ratings. They've been dropping like a rock in mine. They were kind of a little bit of a misleading team because they had so much special team success. Now everything kind of falling apart for Kansas State. A Kansas State team that, as we know, generally a very good bet as an underdog. They were great under Snyder. They've been good under Kleiman. But the last few weeks, they've just gotten blown out and taken to the woodshed in games where they've been a big underdog. So, maybe this is the type of week where instead of having a lot of pre-flop positions, unless you were able to grab numbers early in the week, maybe this is just a phenomenal opportunity for live betting, especially because, as we're going to talk about here in a second, the weather's getting worse around the country. It's just not nearly as fun to be out and about or outside or anything like that. So if you're just going to be chilling on the couch in front of the laptop or the desktop or with your smartphone in your hand, this may be, the optimal live betting week.
Absolutely, because I mean it's tough, guessing who's going to be motivated, who isn't. But usually you have a clue early on in the game, so that's point number one. Maybe some value in live betting, and you hit the nail on the head. A lot of weather in a lot of these games is driven up. I've seen a lot of pre-flop totals get driven down significantly already. We'll see with weather. It's I mean, you guys watch your normal local weatherman. I mean, it could be 50-50 on him at best, even the day before. So sometimes, playing the waiting game, seeing how bad that wind actually is during the game. How hard is it raining? Raining is not going to necessarily be a major factor, but if it's raining really, really hard, then obviously then it could be a factor. Sometimes actually seeing it on your screen right before kickoff or right as the game is starting to be able to get down at that point. I mean, if you've already missed the best of the number early in the week betting those, why not just wait until you can get down in-game live betting?
Well, and something that's always interesting to me regarding weather games is that the total will move, but the side doesn't always move in concert with the total. And you would think big underdogs with the total going down, and there is a game we'll talk about later on in the show, you would think big underdogs would come down as the total comes down.
Yep.
If that doesn't happen, well, that's a pretty good context clue for you. But also, in a given game, if there's going to be bad weather, you would think it's going to impact one team more than the other. So even if you miss some line value on that total dropping down, we have seen total moves 3, 4, 5 points this week because of the weather. At least you can handicap the side knowing that the weather is going to impact the game plan. And think about it. If you've got a team that you expect to be playing from in front, well, theoretically, their team has to pass to get back into the game. If the weather is going to prohibit passing, well, then, maybe that kind of gives you some clues into your handicap. So you don't have to take a bad number on the total or anything like that. You can use weather to handicap the side and possibly find an edge that way.
Excellent point. And immediately a game came to mind for me. It was last year, Purdue, Illinois played in a rainstorm. I bet Purdue early in the week, got in front of a major line move. And the weather was horrific. Didn't know it was going to be like that until game day. It was a torrential downpour. Purdue already one-dimensional, wanted to throw the ball, couldn't throw the ball. It prohibited their offense, and they still kept trying to throw it. Illinois just took advantage of some Purdue interceptions, ran the football, and I had 2-3 points of closing line value with Purdue. But, just because of the way the weather was, I had a really, really bad bet, and the market really didn't adjust and account for that.
Yeah, so definitely something you want to take a look at here in December. Obviously it's been something that we've kind of been contending with in November, although the weather hasn't been too bad in a lot of places. But definitely here this week, especially again, because usually we just have Army-Navy this week, and then we start talking about these bowl games, which are generally in, warmer weather destinations, or at least places where snow and wind won't be a massive factor, but precipitation and wind could be a big factor here this week in college football, as well as over in the NFL, here on a weekly basis this deep into the year. But a couple of games tonight on Thursday night, we'll go ahead and start with these. Pitt's a touchdown favorite against Georgia Tech. This number was 6.5. I played 6.5. We talked about it yesterday on the show. If you wanted Pitt, you should get the 6.5 while it's available. Now it's pretty much off the board, total of 55. And then in the other game, Florida Atlantic and Southern Miss, seeing some FAU money come in here a little bit today, up to as high as 9.5 in the global markets. Total's gone up to 43 in this game as well. Anything on tonight's two games for you, Brad?
Just a couple leans for me. I did like over in Pitt, Georgia Tech, but again, that's been long gone 4 points ago. Over 51 on Sunday is where I bet it. 55, just a lean for me. 7 straight overs for Pitt. And I had their best defensive player opt out. So lean over there. I lean under actually in the Florida Atlantic game. I mean, if you've been blindly betting the under in their games this year, you're 6-1 and you're covering by 17 points per game. I can't lay 9.5 on the road with an offense, FAU, that's averaging 18 points per game. I get it. Southern Miss down to a third string coach, third string quarterback, and they're playing their final game. It's what's been a very forgettable season. But again, FAU's offense, it doesn't make me want to run to the window to bet them as more than a touchdown favorite on the road. So I disagree with the movement towards the over and lean under in that one.
I think that's one of those games we talked about live betting and seeking out opportunities. For Southern Miss, I mean, look, they've covered their last 2 games. They've played, admirably with
Yep.
everything that they've dealt with as a program here, but they've also had the last 2 weeks off. So you wonder if they're able to rally, if they were focused and engaged in practice and film study and all that. Do they want to go out with a good performance, or are they ready for this thing to just be over where they've had quarterback injuries? Their coach resigned after the first game. They've had multiple bouts of COVID on the roster. If they look like a team that doesn't want to be there, then you can make a live betting play on Florida Atlantic. If they look like they want to be there, well, fairly high spread, low total games, stuff like that. That's one of those games that may fit the mold of what we're kind of talking about here on terms of finding live betting opportunities. Friday, one pretty good game, another game where there could be some betting opportunities. And then also UTEP and North Texas, where North Texas 10.5-point favorite. Both you and I lost on North Texas last week against Louisiana Tech. Any chance you're laying doubles here with the Mean Green?
No, I'm not. I mean, I just wasn't impressed at all with them last week. I thought they'd be able to handle Louisiana Tech off of, obviously the Bulldogs hadn't played since Halloween, and they looked like they hadn't missed a beat. So that's concerning for me. Although, I mean, if you gave me a $20 bill, I'd probably lean North Texas here because who's to say what UTEP's going to be? I thought UTEP was a much improved football team, but that was in September. They basically played only a couple games since then. And this one got moved to Denton because of all the COVID restrictions and things that are going on in El Paso. Lean North Texas, but again, nothing more than a ham sandwich there.
Massive game here Friday night in the Mountain West. Nevada and San Jose State. And a lot of the market now painted 3 with San Jose State the favorite. This one at Sam Boyd Stadium in Las Vegas. San Jose State not able to play at home. Obviously, very heavy COVID restrictions across California, on especially where San Jose State is located. Nevada, going to be kind of weird for them playing at Sam Boyd, not playing against their rival, but a ton on the line in this game for these two teams.
Yeah, but they've already played at Sam Boyd this year. This is their third trip to Vegas already. They played at UNLV and Allegiant, already played New Mexico and Sam Boyd, now playing San Jose State and Sam Boyd. So kind of business as usual for them. I would lean Nevada +3, prefer the under. Nevada's defense is a little bit better than the market's giving it credit for. People think Carson Strong in offense for them. That defense isn't that bad, and San Jose State's defense has been pretty good. So, in an all-important game where every possession is going to matter, the winner's going to clinch a berth in the Mountain West Championship game. Lean under for me. That would be my preference.
I do like Nevada a little bit in this one. I've actually got this line on the other side. I've got Nevada favored in this one.
Oh wow!
Now with the neutral site setting. And the thing I think is really interesting about this game, both of these defenses under 5 yards per play allowed. So they've both been very, very good.
Yep.
At the same time, like the Mountain West is bad. I mean, offensively, this is a pretty poor conference. The reason why I like Nevada, along with a little bit of a power ratings look, is that San Jose State's defense has not seen any team with any level of passing efficiency really outside of Hawaii. Nevada is a better passing offense than Hawaii. So
yep.
I think that's a pretty interesting matchup here for San Jose State. And one other thing, I know it's a weird season and there are a lot of strange things happening that, we're not really accustomed to. It's not like either one of these teams are used to playing games in a big spotlight type of setting. Nevada does have a little bit more experience with it. San Jose State really doesn't. I sort of wonder how the Spartans respond to, how big of a moment this is, with the winner likely getting Boise State in the conference title game.
Excellent points. I certainly have that concern. And that's why, while I lean with Nevada here, and I have it San Jose State -1, so certainly power ratings agree with that. But I'm kind of hoping San Jose State might win and they probably play Boise State next week. Then I think the brights will be pretty bright for San Jose State playing a Boise State program that has been there, done that. That'll be my preference as far as fading San Jose State.
And that game would be at Boise State, right? They'd be at home in that one?
I don't know.
I
think it might be here. It's going to be played at the home team of and I don't know if they'll make changes like the Big Ten and put it at Boise State. I mean, Boise State's lost the game, but obviously it was a non-conference against BYU. So I don't know how they're going to treat it. But I mean, I think it came down to winning percentage, and obviously San Jose State would have played more conference games. So technically it should be at San Jose State, but who knows? I don't know how they're going to treat that one. Maybe they play it here at Sam Boyd.
Yeah, again, maybe they played at Allegiant. Who knows? A lot of moving parts here.
Ooh, that's a good point. Why
A lot of
not put
moving
it there?
parts in that game. All right.
Oh yeah.
Probably not a whole lot of moving parts in this game. Arizona State, Arizona Territorial Cup, pretty watered down version of it here for this year. Arizona's not played particularly well. You and I have been very critical of Kevin Sumlin on this show. Think we should see Arizona move on from Kevin Sumlin, but, financially may not be the smartest decision for them here at this point in time. Arizona State's played 2 games, so pretty much a throwaway season for them. What do you think about this one here on Friday night?
I bet Arizona State, but again, much better number, -8. Again, I wish I could run a service on what I bet. 11.5, I still lean that way. I think that's the only way to go here. I know it's a kind of a lost season, but they're better than 0-2. I've watched their games, could have beaten USC. I bet against Arizona State last week. Very fortunate to win that game after a slow start, which was expected. The fact that they didn't play a game in a month. They outplayed UCLA in the second half of that game. A UCLA team that I think is pretty good. So Arizona State's better than their 0-2 record. Arizona's not. I mean, they deserve to be 0-4 and going nowhere under someone. I mean, a school record, 11 straight losses now. They got to cut their ties. I don't care how much it costs you. If it puts you in the red, what's putting you in the red right now is a very bad hire with Kevin Sumlin. So I think Arizona State gets a comfortable win over their rival.
Well, and that's the interesting thing. I think both of us kind of look at Arizona and say they're probably ready for this thing to be over. On the other hand, it is the rivalry game. So, does that kind of spark something for them? And again, I think a live betting opportunity here, if they're getting pushed around early and Arizona State gets out to a comfortable lead, Arizona may roll over. It may just be a spot where they're kind of done with it. So maybe a live betting opportunity on Arizona State to run this thing up a little bit if they get the opportunity.
Absolutely. And another thing you got to look out here is, the next few days, quarterback situation. Does Gunnell come back for Arizona? He's significantly better than what they're getting production-wise out of the true freshman, Will Plummer. Reading the tea leaves, I thought Gunnell's shoulder was going to put him out for the season. They haven't, officially said that yet, but I'll be surprised if he plays. But if he does, you're going to see a little bit of Arizona money come into the market. So that's one thing that you need to keep an eye on here in the next few days.
An interesting one at the top of the board for Saturday here, Wake Forest and Louisville. Louisville, 1 or 1.5, depending on where you look. 63, pretty much the predominant number across the board here for this total. And what's really interesting about this one is that Wake Forest has turned the ball over once this year. Louisville turns the ball over basically 3 times a game.
Yeah, so once a quarter.
Is this handicap that simple?
I think it is. I mean, that's the handicap for me. I know turnovers can mainly be random. I don't think they're random with these teams. I see it every single game for both of these teams. You got one team in Wake Forest is plus 15 on the season. You got a Louisville team that's minus 14. Why do we bring it up? If you win the turnover battle in college football, I just looked it up this week, you cover the point spread 70% of the time. I think there's a greater than 50% chance Wake Forest wins the turnover battle. I think it's actually, probably 55-60% chance that they win the turnover battle. And if that's the case, I think they'll likely cover the point spread. 1 + 1 in this instance equals 2. Got to take Wake.
This is one, too, where Scott Satterfield, coming out of Louisville's last game, had some strange comments. I mean, he kind of talked himself. He
interviewed for the South Carolina job. What the hell's going on?
Yeah, I don't blame the guy for looking at opportunities, but you kind of look at Louisville here where they've fallen well short of expectations this season anyway. I've talked about this at a couple different junctures. I had them power rated to be pretty clearly the second best team in that division, and it has not come to fruition at all. I don't know what's going on, if there's some kind of disconnect, if there's some sort of unrest in that locker room. I don't know, but the optics of everything don't look very good right now for Louisville. And Wake Forest, I mean, Dave Clawson's a very, very good head coach. They should be pretty prepared for this game, I would think. I'm not saying that Wake Forest should be the favorite, but I'm kind of surprised that this line hasn't swung that way as of yet.
I think the pause is we haven't seen Wake Forest since November 14th. That's the hang-up for me. How do they respond after being a month off? Other than that, I think I got to look into it. I think there's a couple running backs out, maybe possibly for Wake Forest. So I got to dive in deeper. This is one, just talking to you in this segment and doing the write-up in my newsletter last night. that game I wasn't really looking at too much, but talking it through, writing it up, I'm certainly looking to bet Wake Forest here. Just got to do a little bit more legwork on this one.
I don't think either one of us wants to talk about Duke and Florida State. So
No, pass.
Okay. All right. So let's go to this Oklahoma and West Virginia game. And I think this one's really fascinating because the line opened around where the line was when this game was originally supposed to be played a couple of weeks ago. Oklahoma last week, not a great showing against Baylor, under 300 yards, 4.6 yards per play. Still a better showing than West Virginia against Iowa State, where they just got taken to the woodshed. This one's up to 14 now. What do you think about this game where the total has come down a little bit as well?
Yeah, I lean West Virginia. It's a little pricey on Oklahoma. I think West Virginia got downgraded significantly, deservedly so, for getting crushed by Iowa State. But I don't think Oklahoma got punished for. I didn't think it was a good result at all against Baylor, especially. I mean, they won by 13, so they didn't cover. But if you dive in the box score, Baylor outgained them. Baylor missed a couple field goals, had a couple of key turnovers in Oklahoma territory. So, I mean, Baylor could have been really live in that game, if not for those couple errors that they had. So I lean West Virginia. I did bet the under here. Both teams' defenses are the class of the Big 12. And the hang up for West Virginia is this. When they can run the ball, they do well. I mean, they've averaged 211 yards per game in their wins, 64 rushing yards per game in their losses. And Oklahoma this year allowing just 89 rushing yards per game. That's early 2000s Oklahoma type style defense. That's not getting enough play in the market. So preference, I lean West Virginia preference, so it would be the under for me.
I agree with everything you said in that handicap. I'm waiting on this one. I don't think I get a 14.5, but if I can find 14, minus 05, something like that, I'll take a piece of West Virginia. But I do like the under in this game as well. Even though this total has moved a little bit, Oklahoma, their season kind of turned when their defense figured it out. The offense has kind of been a little bit up and down with Spencer Rattler, but their season turned when the defense really got things going. I would expect the same here. Also, early kickoff in Morgantown, Oklahoma, with bigger fish to fry in the future in the Big 12 championship game. I think this is a very, very slow start. So maybe a first half under, full game under, possibly look for that, 3-0 middle with a second half over, something like that. But I agree with you on the under for that game for sure. What about the next one on the board? 119-120, Coastal and Troy. Some interesting line movement on this game. I know you picked up Troy plus 15 early in the week. This one came all the way down to 12.5 before getting bet back up to 14. What do you think about it kind of sitting here at the current number of 14?
Yeah, I like Troy at the current number. Not surprised people are betting Coastal Carolina. Why? I mean, they've covered every single game against FBS competition. I think their lone non-cover was against Campbell, and I think they pushed the game against South Alabama. They've covered every other game. So not surprised you're getting that. A lot of people love Coastal Carolina. I don't. I got to play Troy. Why? I love playing historical outliers, and Coastal Carolina just had their biggest win in school history. They got the Sun Belt Championship game on deck. Jamie Chadwell, their coach, even brought it up that he didn't think it was fair that he's playing this week and UL Lafayette isn't. He brought that up in the you just won your biggest game ever against BYU, and he brought this up in the post-game press conference of the BYU game on how it's not fair they're playing this week. So I got to play Troy.
I don't know. I can't disagree with anything you said there. What's your line? Coastal's at home against Louisiana in the Sun Belt title game, right?
Yeah, I got Coastal. Coastal's at home, and I have it 13 and not 13.5. That's this game. I have it 3.5. Coastal 3.5.
Okay, I got Coastal 5. So,
all right.
What do you think? It comes out 4? Somewhere, but splits the difference in our number.
Yeah, I feel like I'm a little low. Yeah, splitting the difference. I feel like I'm a little low on Coastal in the power rating. So yeah, 4 sounds about right.
I see. That's one of the difficulties of power ratings, and we can talk about this. Heading into next season, is that do you want to be in line with the market, or do you want to be in line with your own perception and evaluation of these teams? And for me, I mean, look, I give Coastal all the credit in the world. I've loved watching their games. I love everything that Chadwell's doing. I have Coastal 23rd in my power ratings. So,
holy cow.
For me, I've kind of followed the market trend where the market keeps going up and up and up on them. And also they've been covering the numbers too. Yep. So that's kind of the difference, I think, between you and I. We probably have Louisiana in a similar spot. I'm just maybe a 1.5 or so higher on Coastal.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. I mean, I got him 35th in the country. If I gave him an extra 1.5 or so, they'd be, creeping into that top 25 range. I've upgraded Coastal more than any team in the country, 16.5 points this year, and I was high on them coming into the season. I mean, in their first 3-4 games, I think I bet them and put them in my newsletter a couple of times. So, I mean, I was all about Coastal at the start of the season. I've been priced out. Maybe I don't upgrade teams, maybe fast enough, but I've had success other than, across the board pretty much. What I struggle with is the teams that just consistently just crush numbers, and maybe I just don't upgrade those teams enough.
No, I think that's fair. And also, it feels like the market's been a little more reactionary than usual this year. So I have made some much more significant adjustments when we've had a decent sample size for these teams. So that could be a difference between my set of power ratings and yours as well. Game 127, 128 is a real head scratcher for me. Houston's up to 5 against Memphis here, total 62.5, 63. And maybe it's fair with where both teams are for this season, but you don't see Memphis in a home conference dog roll like this in the AAC very often. And this line's even gone up. I think I have Memphis -1 personally.
Memphis -1 for me.
Is somebody opting out? Is there COVID?
I haven't seen anything yet. I got to do more legwork. I am very concerned that this line is moving so significantly against my power rating. But it's one of my biggest overlays of the week. If I do the legwork and I don't see COVID issues at Memphis and anything that raises some red flags, I will bet Memphis. Houston hasn't played in a month. They're average at best. They've lost to the 3 best teams they played. They've beaten the 3 weaker teams that they played. Memphis is kind of in that middle. I've seen Memphis play. I mean, they've consistently been playing games actually the last few weeks, and it's been underwhelming. But I mean, I don't get it. Houston -5. I'm stunned that they're favored, and I'm even more stunned that they're taking money.
That's the part that I can't get. If you want to favor Houston, if you think maybe there's a sentiment that Memphis is kind of quitting on the season a little bit, something like that. I also thought last week's line for Memphis and Tulane was pretty eye-catching, and Tulane obviously took care of business there in that one.
Point.
Maybe Memphis just isn't very good, or maybe they're just not very engaged, or Brady White's kind of regressed this year as a 12th year senior. I don't know, but there's something off about that game, and I can't figure out what it is, and it's probably going to lead me to leave my power ratings overlay alone.
Probably the case for me. I already bet Memphis, so I just got to figure out whether I'm doubling down or trying to get off. I bet them at a bad number though, +3 on Sunday. So I liked them enough to bet them at +3. I'm concerned that it's moved against me. Most numbers don't. More often than not. And, but again, I don't know. I've seen a lot of steam chasing this year more than ever, especially if they think it's, maybe COVID related. I mean, people just keep betting, even at bad numbers. And we've seen, obviously depending on what it is and who's out, but I mean, it's been 50-50 at best on these big steam moves.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, maybe people are just assuming, making assumptions that there is something going on, and I won't do that. And from the sound of it, you won't do that either. So we'll see what happens with that line if it does come back down, or if something comes to light about the Memphis Tigers football program. Game 133, 134. I mean, this is a throwaway game for most people. I'm sure most shows aren't even going to talk about it, but TCU's laying 21.5 against Louisiana Tech here. Totals come down from 54.5 to as low as 52 in the marketplace. I have no idea what to do with this game simply because, look, I mean, La Tech's getting a chance against a Power 5 team, and maybe that keeps them engaged. I know TCU's a lot better, but I also don't know really what TCU is. And I've talked about them in a few junctures here too, where I just don't think they're very good, and Patterson's trending in the wrong direction with this team. Are you invested in this game at all?
I am. I bet the over again at a bad number. I'm surprised, and I got to check weather. Maybe that's the issue in this one, but TCU and Oklahoma State game, that game left a ton of points on the board by both teams. Louisiana Tech offensively looked fine last week against North Texas. Didn't look like they missed a beat, even though they hadn't played it in 6 weeks. Over for me, I also lean La Tech. Skip Holtz is a big dog. Gimme there. Not a big bet, but Yeah, TC. I guess they're going the right direction this year. They've won and covered 4 of their last 5 games, but again, they don't look overly impressive doing it. I mean, I give them credit. Last week they covered a game that they were -4 in turnovers, and I mean that's incredibly tough to do. But again, they didn't look that great doing it. Again, very sloppy. So I mean, a lot of more question marks than answers. Lean over, lean dog. That's what I got.
That sounds good. And I apologize to our listeners. If you wanted to hear Gary Patterson's country music on today's show, which Brad and I talked about last week,
yeah.
I forgot all about it here. So I don't have that
Yeah.
queued up. My apologies. It would have been a great lead in for
It
TCU.
would have been.
But maybe we get another opportunity down the line here. Next game on the board, I know you've got a stronger opinion on this one. 135-136, Utah State, Colorado State. The floor is yours because I totally agree with your position on this game.
Yeah, and I'm just looking. It looks like Utah State's taking a little bit of money. I got to look into it. That really concerns me. I thought the number would jump up to 14, but I love Colorado State here. Here's the value that I see. Colorado State has gotten, failed to cover their last 2 games against Boise State and San Diego State. Why? They gave up five special teams touchdowns combined in those 2 games. If you look at the yardage, it doesn't look too bad at all in both of those games. I got a first-year coach. I'm not a huge fan of Steve Adazio, but I think they're going to try to want to build momentum here in a game that they should absolutely win. Utah State's with an interim coach, just got crushed last week at home against Air Force. I just love the value here on Colorado State, and a little surprised this morning. I'm seeing a little bit of Utah State money come in.
Yeah, maybe it's just one of those things where, again, a game that's got a relatively low total in the low 50s. You got the double-digit dog, this and that. Maybe people don't want to trust Colorado State, and Adazio is a big favorite, but I agree with you, and this is where box score study comes into play. I know we talk a lot about power ratings on this specific segment with Brad, but we talk a lot about box score study. I do it on Mondays by myself. I do it on Wednesdays with Kyle Hunter, and we work it into the handicap here on Thursdays. Colorado State, with those 5 special teams touchdowns against, they didn't play that badly defensively against Boise State. They just had all sorts of issues on special teams. And maybe that happens again here. It's a possibility. But Colorado State, and we talked about this yesterday on the show, they're like 14th or something in yards per play allowed and like 103rd in points per game allowed. And it's because of their special teams problems. This is a play on spot from a box score and statistical standpoint for Colorado State. So I completely agree with your take on the game.
Thank you. Made me feel a little bit better. Let's hope it wins. This is typical. I mean, this is why I do what I do. I mean, this is just one where, because I do a box score right up on every single game. So it's been like 500 games already this year. And this is one where why do you go through the play-by-plays and the box scores each week? This is Exhibit A. I hope it wins, but I mean, this is one of. If you talk about some of the pillars of my handicapping, this would be one of them here.
Next game I want to touch on here: Auburn laying 6.5 on the road in Stark Vegas. Total 49.5 against Mississippi State. I've got an overlay on this game. I've got Auburn more like a double-digit favorite. What am I missing? Why is this line off of 7?
I got it at 9. So yeah, power ratings say Auburn's a play. I didn't play it though. I don't know if Auburn. I mean, they just got done playing Alabama and an A&M game where they had an opportunity to win. I bet them last week. 17-0. They get outscored in the fourth quarter. What else is there to play for here? Mississippi State, you thought were waving the white flag on the season, and they're probably off 2 of their better performances in 7-point losses at Georgia and at Ole Miss. So they haven't given up on the season. It looks like so. That's why I can't bet it. What I did bet, I bet the over 45. If Auburn's not interested, well, where does that usually show up? A lot of times it shows up on defense. And Mississippi State has finally got their offense moving a little bit the last couple of weeks. So I bet over 45.
We'll come back to the SEC in a second, but Utah, Colorado 2-point favorite here. Low total on this game as well. What do you think about this one where, Colorado has exceeded expectations greatly, and I think Utah is better than what their performance would suggest so far?
Huge overlay here. I have Utah 4, so I like Utah. Bet them +3. Obviously, that's a key number. Would love to be able to give them out at that. Still, I think they win the game. So, give me Utah money line. I've had Colorado as my top play of the week the last 2 weeks, and they're getting overvalued now in the market. Utah, you're right. better than their performance. Better in the USC game because of turnovers. Better in the Washington game because they gave up a 21-0 lead. Better last week because they gave up 2 late touchdowns in the fourth quarter against Oregon State. They have not played a complete game yet. If they do finally put it together, if you told me, hey, Utah is going to play 60 minutes to their capability, and Colorado's going to play 60 minutes to their capability, I would have my biggest bet of the week on Utah.
Yeah, this is one I agree. I mean, I think this is a spot where Colorado's played well. They've been a great story, but I think Utah is still the more trustworthy team just from a historical standpoint and from the fact that the more data points you give Kyle Whittingham, the better his team should wind up being. And I think this is a pretty good spot here for Utah. Early kickoff, though, in Boulder, so we'll see what happens there with that one. Am I an idiot for wanting to fade Alabama this week minus 32?
Oh, jeez.
I mean, the thing, and here's the whole crux of my argument, and I could be dead wrong on this. The way you compete with Alabama is you score with Alabama. If you try to beat them 21-17, 24-21, something like that, you're not going to do it. But we've seen Ole Miss. We saw Ole Miss early in the year go up and down the field with Alabama for a while, rack up, 700 yards in that game, something like that. We've seen Texas A&M do it in the past with Johnny Manziel and some of the teams that they've had. I don't know. To me, I look at Arkansas, and they're perfectly comfortable playing a game that they lose, 55-31 or something like that.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, the SEC championship games on deck. They're often, a big performance against LSU. Arkansas has been, better than their 3-6 record. They could have easily, won a couple more games. They're 7-2 against the number. Yeah, Arkansas, sounds good in theory, but even though you're paying a premium on Alabama, I mean, they've covered 6 straight by 12 points per game. The Crimson Tide, the most public team in college football, has covered 6 straight by 12 points per game. I mean, I just think they're significantly better than everybody else. I don't care if it's Arkansas or if it's Clemson. I mean, Alabama, to me, very surprising if they're not, bringing home the championship when it's all said and done. But, I mean, 32 does sound like too much. But I thought 29 might have been too much last week, and no problem covering that. They had it by halftime.
Yeah. What is your Clemson Alabama number if they do meet?
I think I'm up to 4.5 right now. It gets wider each week. Yeah, 4.5.
I got 4 on that one. I've got Alabama 9.5 better than Ohio State, 12 better than Florida, and then 16 better than Notre Dame. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, I think I got the Buckeye game a little tighter. It's in the 7.5, 8 range. Alabama, Florida in the 2 touchdown range. And then I think the 15.5 range against the Irish.
All right, so I got Florida a little bit higher in the market than you do, and we'll see, what that looks like in terms of next week's game. When Florida and Alabama do wind up getting together. Let's do a highlight video here for one of these SEC games. I'm host Adam Burke of ATS Radio, joined by professional bettor and handicapper Brad Powers from BradPowersSports.com. Game 307-308 is Tennessee and Vanderbilt. Tennessee laying 15, which seems like a very big number for a struggling Volunteers bunch. Total 50.5 in this one. But, Brad, you don't think it's that big of a number for the Volunteers?
Yeah, with a team that's lost 6 straight games, playing, a couple young quarterbacks on the road. It doesn't sound ideal, but I am going to lay it here with Tennessee minus the 15. And to me, it comes down to it's more of a play against Vanderbilt, who, has had a lot of bad performances this season. They just had their worst performance of the season in their last game against Missouri. They get beat 41-0, and the box score reflected that, outgained by like 400 yards. And to me, Tennessee's just as good as Missouri. Crushed them earlier in the year when Tennessee was playing, better at that point. And I just think Jeremy Pruitt and the Volunteers need a feel-good win. They are on the school record 6-game losing streak. And, you could say, they kind of given up on the season. No, they haven't. They got the back door against Florida last week. Could have covered against Auburn if not for a 100-yard interception return touchdown. So I don't think they've given up at all. I question whether or not Vanderbilt gave up the season. Interim coach that has no shot of getting the full gig because they're already interviewing other coaches. The Sarah Fuller story, the girl kicker, I mean, I don't care where you're at on that side of the spectrum. But reading the tea leaves, and I do a lot of work in the Nashville area as far as shows, and they kind of give me little tidbits. I'm not sure that that's overwhelmingly supportive of everybody in that locker room. So I don't think that's a good mix. And Vanderbilt earlier when they released the depth chart, looks like they're going to be down to less than 50 scholarship players for this game. So add it up for me. I think Tennessee rolls. And if they get an opportunity to put it on Vanderbilt, I think they do it.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point here too in these rivalry games. If you get a chance to kick an opponent while they're down,
do it.
You want to do it. And especially for Tennessee with the season that they're having, the situation that they're in. And you bring up some great points about Vanderbilt, some things that maybe we're not as privy to in a general sense of, where that locker room kind of sits with everything going on. And not even just the Sarah Fuller story, but simply Derek Mason was probably a pretty well-liked coach in that locker room. He didn't have a whole lot to work with. The, admissions requirements at Vanderbilt are quite high, especially relative to the other SEC programs. He wasn't really set up for success there, but becomes the scapegoat, as is often the case with these coaches. And, I wonder for the players, if it's something where they show up at all here in this game. And I think you're definitely on to a lot of good points with that handicap. So Brad Powers on Tennessee here. I agree with his position, laying 15 or 15.5 against Vanderbilt here in week 15. Make sure you subscribe to our ATS YouTube page for all of our highlight videos, and also check out our full shows on ATS Radio, which you can find anywhere you stream and download your podcast content. All right, looking down the rest of the board here, I want to make sure we got some time to talk some NFL, but the Big Ten, obviously they've changed the rules for Ohio State in the playoff. I guess, why people are upset about that, but the conference gets money when Ohio State goes to the playoff. The networks want money for Ohio State going to the playoff. Yep. It was going to happen. It is what it is. Wisconsin, a 1.5-point favorite, 41.5 the total against Iowa. Penn State laying over 2 touchdowns at home against Michigan State with a low total in that one. Rutgers and Maryland laying over a touchdown. Anything in those 3 Big Ten games from you?
Strongest position is going to be Rutgers for me. I've seen them play, and I know they're off probably their worst performance this season, but, Penn State, I think Penn State's a little undervalued just because they started 0-5. They could have easily won a couple more games. So I thought it was more good Penn State than bad Rutgers. Other than that, Rutgers has been relatively consistent this year. I mean, I don't know what to expect with Maryland. They got a couple of big outright wins over Minnesota, who stinks this year, against Penn State, who obviously was in the stretch of that 0-5 start. And they also got crushed by Northwestern, got beat by Indiana. I'm not laying more than a touchdown with Mike Locksley as head coach. I have the coaching edge superior, I think, in my opinion, with Schiano. And I got a team that's been playing every single week against a team that's been ravaged with COVID with 3 of their last 4 games canceled. So I had to take the touchdown plus here. And power ratings, I only have Maryland by 4. On the other games, I agree with the money on Wisconsin. I got them 1. Can't bet it now, though. And I'd lean Penn State over Michigan State. I think the Spartans are done.
Well, and also the canceled game with Maryland and Ohio State, you were on Ohio State in that one as well.
Big,
yeah, that was one of your bigger overlays. I had a pretty big overlay in that game too. So definitely understand continuing to follow through with that anti-Maryland sentiment there in that one. The MAC games. We've got Western Michigan, Ball State, massive game. Winner goes to Detroit to take on Buffalo at Ford Field for the conference championship. Akron and Buffalo, not so much. NIU, Eastern Michigan, same thing. Central and Toledo. Central's down to their 3rd-string quarterback now, so that's why that line's sitting there at double digits. But this Western Michigan Ball State game, I think, is really interesting. Totals come down a little bit. Weather a factor in the Midwest, as we already talked about. But this one came off of 3 early in the week. Ball State now pretty much 2.5 market wide. What do you think about this one, which looks to be a very good, very competitive game?
Yeah, winner, is going to play for the MAC championship. So that motivation's not going to be an issue for either. And that's kind of what you want to take some of the variance out of it, especially this year. So, I'm not going to question either team's motivation. So then it comes to the power rating. Unfortunately, I got it Ball State 2.5. So I didn't have a bet. I'll say this almost across the board in the MAC games. Let's see how bad the weather is. Cause I've seen a lot of movement toward the under already. And I'll tell you, if the weather isn't as bad as what's being forecasted right now, I think the market's kind of overreacted if that's going to be the case. I might be betting some, MAC games over the total, because if you've been following in the MAC this year, very high scoring league. It reminds me of the WAC in the 80s and 90s in some of these games. So I mean, we'll see Toledo Central Michigan. I could bet the over there. Eastern Michigan, Northern Illinois over, and this Ball State Western Michigan game. If the weather's not that bad, I mean, I'd go over in this one as well.
All right, so a higher profile game in the ACC, a couple of them, and then we'll transition over to the NFL side of things here. North Carolina and Miami. Miami laying 3 total in this game, up in the upper 60s. How about this one?
Power ratings Miami 4. I'm just not anxious to lay it there. Over. That sounds very public, but I mean both teams got a really good quarterback play. Miami's found a little bit more of their vertical pass game. A lot of weapons for North Carolina. Lean over. Really good game. Popcorn game, really, to be perfectly honest with you. Not going to get a lot of national attention. It should. Just a game that, I'm going to sit down and enjoy some. I mean, that's college football there. Two teams that I think are legitimate top 20 caliber.
Yeah, I got this one Miami -1, so I got a little bit of value on the North Carolina side. I talked about this on yesterday's show, actually a different show that I did, the Odds Breakers with Kev O'Neill, a very good show there. But I couldn't tell you anything Miami did this year outside of losing to Clemson badly. Like, I just, for whatever reason, out of sight, out of mind with this team. and I feel like maybe that's reflective in my power rating where you and I are 3 points different here, but just I couldn't tell you anything Miami's done. And it's not because I dislike Miami or anything like that. It's just, I don't know. They just have not gotten my attention any week, really, since losing to Clemson. And maybe I just wrote them off, and maybe shame on me for that. Maybe there were some opportunities to make some money on them coming out of that game. But I can't tell you a damn thing Miami's done otherwise. And I can tell you that, North Carolina, while they've disappointed me a little bit from where I had them, I still know they've got a very high ceiling. So I'd give them the benefit of the doubt. But like you, I think this is a game that could easily get into the 80s where neither team's playing for anything except for, padding their own stats.
Oh, I think Miami's playing for the possibility to go to the Orange Bowl. Highest rated, ACC team that's not in the playoff.
That's a good point.
Goes to the Orange Bowl. So I think, they win this one. They're in pretty good shape for that, depending on what happens. And, I'm expecting both Notre Dame and Clemson to be in the playoffs. So, yeah, I mean, there's at least that. I'll tell you why you haven't been, Miami hasn't been in your thought process. There hasn't been incredible values in their games. Most of their games play right to the point spread. They failed to cover the spread a couple of times as a double-digit favorite, but they still won the game. And they're just, their most impressive performance was last week, 48-0. That was the eye-popping win or loss that they've had since the Clemson game.
What about the rivalry game here, 421-422, Virginia Tech? I don't know if either one of these teams is honestly worth a bet here. Virginia, we've talked about them a lot on the show, that their statistical profile screams regression, and we may run out of time to actually play against them. Although I know we did a little bit last week on the show with Boston College, and that one didn't work out. But how the hell can I lay a number with Virginia Tech here with what's going on with that program where offensively they're fine. They're actually quite good offensively. Defensively, they're a shit show.
Yeah, no more, Bud Foster was as much as the Virginia Tech program as Frank Beamer. Two teams and programs heading in opposite directions as far as I'm concerned, but I need 3 from Virginia to bet them. You're right. Their record is better than their statistical profile. Phil Jurkovec, the Boston College quarterback, late scratch last week, very late scratch where the market didn't know that until right before game time.
And Boston College threw for 520 yards anyway.
Yeah, but the kid threw 3-4 interceptions. So that's what did it in. So, yeah, maybe higher scoring. I'll have to check the weather on this one. Maybe a higher scoring game.
All right, I guess I lied. I guess I'd ask you about one more college game here just because we have to talk about this game. I love this game every year. I don't care how ugly it ends up being. I always watch it. Army-Navy game. Army at home here at West Point, and this number's gone up pretty much gradually throughout the week now to where it sits on 7. Some books even juicing the 7 to -115. Total has officially plummeted. 14 in a row have gone under. Everyone's kind of picked up on this already, finally. Total 37.5. What do you think about Army-Navy this year?
Yeah, let's see how low that goes because I want to play the over. I played the under at 43, but it's getting to the point now it's almost ridiculous. I mean, people are just blindly playing that trend, and it's now by far the lowest total in that stretch. That's what people don't realize, that we, if it was against this number, it wouldn't be 14 straight unders. Tough because it's the first time it's been on campus since 1943. It's not that isolated game where it gets all the attention for 1 week. It's only the second time Army's been favored in the series since 2002. 7 seems right. They're the superior team. Navy stinks. I mean, they just do. And here's the thing that I understand some of the money towards Army. Navy's had to play the last 2 weeks. They can't, put all the preparation, the playbook towards this game. Meanwhile, Army's been off the last 2 weeks. So that's a significant edge for Army here. But again, with a total in approaching the mid-30s, I'm not laying more than a touchdown.
Well, and I mean, obviously, this is the premier game of the Commander-in-Chief's Trophy Series, but Army plays Air Force next week.
Yep.
They don't usually play after the Navy game, due in large part because they don't make a bowl game. They have the last few years, but they don't play the week right after playing Navy. So that's a fascinating handicap next week that I'm sure we'll talk about on the show.
Yeah, I want Army to beat up Navy pretty good, and then I'll take Air Force next week. That'll be the bet.
I agree. I think so too. Even with Air Force coming cross country to West Point, I think that's still probably the way to look there in that one. All right, we transition over to the NFL side of the spectrum here for week 14, and we start with the Thursday night game for the day of, listeners. And you and I were kind of talking about this before we hit the record button and started doing today's show, that it's surprising to both of us to see Patriots money coming in to drop this one down to 4.5 tonight with a total of 44.
It is. I lean under, and we've seen some money come in on the under, but I prefer the Rams now. I mean, I don't think people realize this. If you're just going off a yards per game differential, the Rams are number 1 in the NFL. I mean, they have been, more impressive than even their results. Last week I played them, even though the market was kind of, I thought shorting them in the game against the Cardinals. I know New England is, coming off a couple wins, but I mean, even though they beat the Chargers 45-0 last week, in their last 2 games of Patriots offense, 470 yards, not per game, total yards, 470. I just, on a short week, I know they stayed out in LA, so travel's not really an issue, but Thursday night home favorites, people don't bet them enough, 60% against the spread. I like the Rams here.
I like the Rams too. I mean, this is a game that I liked at 6, and I kind of sat there letting it marinate, because I'm like, well, whatever. I'm not going to it's not going to be a huge bet or anything like that. I'm going to pay attention to the game tonight because what the hell else am I going to do? So I'll put some action on the Rams because I do like them at 6. And I like them a lot at 4.5. I mean, I agree with what you're saying that I don't think people realize how good the Rams are. And I've kind of picked up on this. I've taken them the last 2 weeks in the circa, had them against Tampa Bay, had them against Arizona. I think that what people don't like about the Rams is they still have this perception of Jared Goff. And Jared Goff's been pretty decent this year, while the Rams have one of the best running games in the NFL, top running game by DVOA, from what I remember. McVay has figured out how to zig while everyone else is zagging. Everyone else wants to be Sean McVay. Now Sean McVay is doing his own thing, and the Rams are really good defensively. They've got shutdown guys at both corners. They've got the best defensive lineman in the world in Aaron Donald. This is a really good football team, and I don't think people realize it because they want to sit here and shit on Jared Goff all the time. Rams minus 4.5 for me. I like them at 6. I certainly like them at 4.5.
No disagreement for me, buddy. And maybe there's, people are remembering the Super Bowl and the mismatch in that regard. Not the same teams.
No, not
certainly not New England.
And maybe New England's better than I'm giving them credit for.
They're not.
Last week they beat a team that the coach came out and said, "Yeah, we're not making the playoffs." Like, I don't know what's going through England's mind, but
what I'm so surprised of the pro New England money. It was anti-New England money in the market last week, and that scared me. And I know a lot of sharp guys that are actually sharper than me in the NFL were betting the Chargers and telling me how they were like one of their favorite bets. I'm like, I'm not seeing it. It's the biggest coaching mismatch of all time. I mean, all time. That's was my words, and it proved out to be that case. But you look at the statistical. I mean, that was nowhere near a 45-0 game last week.
No, not at all. I don't get this money. And there have been some game day moves this season that I have not gotten at all. And some of them have been right. Some of them have been wrong. I don't know where this one falls, but I can tell you what, I'm I'm playing the Rams. I mean, I don't think it's going to go any lower down to 4. I'll have to take the 4.5, but I'm on the Rams tonight. So we'll see if we can start the NFL week off with a winner. I'm not taking it in the circa for what it's worth. I'm not putting in all 5 of my plays with all the uncertainty of this season, but we'll have the Rams in pocket here for this one. You and I were talking before we started recording here that I don't know how many great straight bets there are this week, but this is kind of a teaser lover's paradise across the board.
Yeah, I mean, you got favorites, you got dogs, a lot through that 3 and 7 corridor. Green Bay, Tennessee. I know it's not ideal road favorites, but I think 2 teams that are in the playoff mix that'll probably take care of business. I'm not sure I want to lay more than a touchdown with either one, but I think both win. Giants, not a high variance team, just play hard, and whether they lost some close games early, now they're winning them. I don't see Arizona getting margin on the Giants, so Giants in a teaser makes a lot of sense. Just it's kind of where the market's moving. I mean, a lot more teaser action from me than ever before.
Yeah, I mean, Kansas City, they could put margin on anybody if they wanted to. They seem to not really want to, but if I can get them -1.5 when I assume Mahomes has the ball last, I'm doing that. I mean, we saw Miami last week. They moved the ball relatively effectively between the 20s against Cincinnati, got to the red zone and bogged down. If you're going to get 3 instead of 7 when you're playing Pat Mahomes and the Chiefs, you're probably not going to win that football game. So Kansas City -1.5 makes sense to me. You can always tease Pittsburgh up if you believe in the Steelers on Sunday Night Football. Now, that one's 2.5. Steelers up to 8.5 with a lower total game. That one makes some sense.
Yep.
Starting to see 1.5 pop on Baltimore. Cleveland +7.5, I think, makes some sense too with a lower total in that one. It's a great week for teasers. I don't know necessarily about a lot of pre-flop action on side or total, though.
Couldn't agree more. One thing I want to mention to Miami, I know that they're an NFL best 9-2 against the spread their last 11, and KC's failed to cover 4 in a row. Who has Miami played? Chargers, Broncos, Jets, Bengals the last 4 weeks. I know it's not a great spot for Kansas City off Sunday Night Football, the Saints on deck, but it's that's being priced into this number. I don't think Miami's that good. They just haven't played anybody.
I think it's hard because I believe in Miami. If Miami had Ryan Fitzpatrick here, I'm playing +7.5.
But Tua hasn't thrown an interception all year. What's not like about Tua?
The red zone play calling is a joke. The red zone, it's bad. It's just really bad. And maybe that's not Tua's fault. I mean, okay, he's taking care of the football, and that's very important, but they're not the least bit explosive offensively. It's a very methodical thing. And at some point, good teams, well-coached teams, are going to get you out of that. They're not going to keep giving up these 3rd and 3s, 3rd and 4s like these other teams have to Miami. Kansas City, again, if they want to, and the problem is knowing when they want to. If they want to, they can blow out anybody in this league. Absolutely anybody on any given day.
Yep.
They don't do it. And I don't know if they do it to dick around and, force themselves into close games or whatever the case may be. But they don't want to truck anybody, and they can. And so I can't take them 7.5 here, or even 7 for that matter, if the game comes down to it, but -1.5, absolutely. So not necessarily a thing against Tua. And I know Fitzpatrick has a higher risk profile than Tua does. And maybe that hurts in a game like this. I don't know, but just Tua's got to prove to me that when he gets into a scoring situation, they can come away with 7. Because if you keep putting it on this defense, which is very, very good, don't get me wrong, eventually they're going to falter. And we're seeing that now with Pittsburgh, for example, where Pittsburgh's offense is very middle of the road. The defense is really good. And now you've put it on the defense time and time and time again, and they're starting to lose guys to injury, and it's really hurting the profile of this team to the point where I agree with Buffalo being -2.5. I think it could very well get to 3, and I wouldn't have anything against that. It's just in the current NFL, you cannot put it on your defense all the time. You just can't. And it's a worry that I have with a team like the Giants, where maybe this is the week where their defense does falter and the offense can't keep pace. You can't do it in today's NFL. It's just impossible.
Good points. It almost feels in Pittsburgh's
look
case,
at Chicago.
Yeah.
Chicago's defense is starting to falter now. I'm not saying I'm going to take Houston this week, but week in and week out, if you keep putting it on the defense, it doesn't work.
It doesn't. It's obviously we've seen where it's been going the last 5 years. Offensively driven team, best. I mean, forever it was better defense. Best defense beats best offense. Not the case now. It just isn't the last 4 or 5 years. And seeing that in Pittsburgh's instance, we've seen them like hold on, like squeezed in tight to that unbeaten record. And now that the dam's finally broke, I think you could see Pittsburgh lose a couple games in a row.
Well, and sticking with that theme, let's do a highlight video here from the NFL. 4-game 175-176, Washington and San Francisco. I'm host Adam Burke, joined by pro bettor and handicapper Brad Powers. And what we were just talking about, and we encourage you to listen to the full shows of ATS Radio, is that when you keep putting it on your defense week after week after week, game after game after game, at some point it becomes a lot. And we're seeing that now with teams like Pittsburgh. We're seeing that, with some of the other teams around the league here. I wonder if that factors into your handicap a little bit with this Washington and San Francisco game, where credit to Washington, they've done what they've had to do to be up tied at the top of the NFC East standings. But you wonder if that defense can have similar success here against a fellow good defense in San Francisco.
Yeah, and it's also not an ideal spot, third straight road game for Washington. And, that sometimes when you're leaning on that defense, if they don't have the legs, it could be, troublesome here. And, a couple of my main handicaps here, San Francisco's kind of been a Jekyll and Hyde team. 1 week they're up. They look like clear playoff contenders. I don't care who's playing at quarterback. I don't care who's in their lineup. They look like a legit playoff team. And then, last week, even though the entire world and the market was on San Francisco, they were obviously outclassed against Buffalo. This to me seems like a play on week. And here's why I think it's a play on week. You're not going to hear this hardly anywhere else. Kyle Shanahan hates Washington. He hates Washington. Why? Washington fired his dad. Washington fired him, Kyle. Last year, if you remember, San Francisco went into Washington and won. He gave the game ball at the end of it to his dad. It would have been worse, but it was played in a torrential downpour. They won 9-0. I think there's some, bad vibes still to this day with, Kyle Shanahan and the Washington organization. So I just think Washington's been a cool story here the last few weeks. I think San Francisco, this is their play on game here. So I like the 49ers quite a bit. Don't mind laying the 120 if you want to play the key number 3 here. They're probably my favorite play of the week, the 49ers.
I like the 49ers too. This is one that's on my short list in a game that you actually brought to my attention. I hadn't really done a ton of legwork on this game, but everything you said makes sense. And something else here for me too is that, as you mentioned, everybody on San Francisco last week, and this line is relatively in the same spot as where that line closed in last week's game.
Something doesn't make sense. And then you compare the Washington, Pittsburgh. Washington was catching 5.5, and now they're catching 3 against San Francisco. I just one of the two doesn't match up if you compare these two teams' lines to last week.
Well, and the thing about it too is, I actually liked Buffalo last week. I was against the money, against the movement in that game. In fact, you owe me dinner for that one. But one of the reasons why is I'm like, okay, you've got Josh Allen in a controlled environment there in Arizona. He's played extremely well when weather hasn't been a factor. So I expected Buffalo to have some offensive success in that game, and they did. The defense was getting healthier. They were able to make some plays on the defensive side, this and that. Washington's offense is not Buffalo's offense. It's really not even close. McLaurin is the big weapon. Outside of that, Washington, kind of hope and pray to a certain degree. Why is it that last week, as San Francisco was getting healthier, everybody loved them? Now this week, nobody wants to touch them. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. If San Francisco wins and covers that game against Buffalo last week, even with Washington beating Pittsburgh, what's this number? 4.5, 5?
Look ahead line was 4.5.
So if San Francisco plays up to last week's expectation put on them by the betting market, this number is quite a bit higher. Because they didn't, we get a discounted San Francisco team, and I'm on the same side as you.
Love it. Glad we don't have a dinner bet on this one.
I know. Right?
I got to tell you, after all that money came in on San Francisco, I was feeling pretty good.
I bet.
I was like, man, I got one here on them. Nope.
No.
Actually, I didn't feel that way. Honestly, it was so one-sided San Francisco money. I ended up on game day betting Buffalo. Are you kidding me? That was almost overwhelming. I couldn't believe it.
Well, and that's one. It was the same thing for me with Washington last week. I'm already locked in for the contest for the Circus Sports Million. That's my 5-0 game with Washington, and all this money comes in on Washington. And I'm just shaking my head. I'm texting everybody, going, "I'm going to lose this game. There's no way Washington covers with everybody on this side." They, of course, wind up winning the game outright. So, that was fortunate. But yeah, I think this is a major mispricing here. And it's a very, what have you done for me lately kind of price. And I disagree with it. I think San Francisco definitely the side here. So a consensus opinion from us on ATS Radio with the Washington and San Francisco game. Make sure you subscribe to the full editions of ATS Radio and also subscribe to our ATS YouTube channel. All right, before I let you go here, a couple other games I want to ask you about. Actually, I guess I'll just ask you about one more, since I know your thoughts on Indy and Las Vegas since we talked before the show. You know what? The listeners deserve it too. Indy and Las Vegas, what do you think about that one?
I want to take the Raiders +3, another Jekyll and Hyde team, and off a couple of bad performances, even though they won against the Jets last week, is still a bad performance. This seems like a play-on spot for them. I mean, we've seen them play really well at home against the Chiefs and the Saints already this season. But what I prefer over the Colts playmakers look relatively healthy at running back and wide receiver. It's on a 6-2 run in Indy games and should be 7-1 if you followed the Indianapolis-Houston total last week. I mean, unbelievable that it's 24-20 at halftime and doesn't go over the total. Raiders games 8-3-1 to the over. Don't have to worry about weather. It's a really good field that they play on here in Vegas. Over 51.5 for me, and a slight lean on the Raiders.
Yeah, and I mean, I get it. The Raiders are, a very efficient offensive team, but also that playing surface does seem to lend itself to points. On the opposite side, SoFi Stadium, where the Rams and Chargers play, they say it's a very slow track. So we've seen a lot of their totals in their games either get bet down or open pretty low, much like the Atlanta and Chargers total here this week. I like the Raiders here. I think this is a handicap kind of akin to what we saw with Tennessee and Cleveland last week, in that Tennessee played a bunch of tough games in a row, division opponents, this and that, and the Browns just took it to them in the first half. And I'm not saying that the Raiders are going to do the same thing here. I hope that they do, because the Raiders will be one of my picks here for this week. But for Indianapolis, their last few games, the Houston game last week, they probably should have lost, got that fumble inside the 5. That preserved the win in the cover for them. Tennessee the week before, a pissed off Tennessee team that they blew out 2 weeks prior. The Green Bay game was a close game, a big comeback for Indianapolis in that one. The Baltimore loss back on November 8th. They've played 5 tough games in a row. Now they've got the long travel to Vegas, back-to-back road games, Houston on deck again, a game they figure they can win because they've got that one at home against one of the bottom feeders in the division. I think this is a bad spot for Indy. This is a play-on spot for Vegas, who, look, they didn't play well against the Jets. They got run off the field by Atlanta. I was on Atlanta in that one, so I was happy to see that one. But their playoff hopes got a second wind with that walk-off win. They've got to be feeling pretty good about themselves in the sense that they're still alive. They've played bad football on that 2-game road trip, and they're still alive. I think it's a good play-on spot for Vegas here.
Can't disagree with what you said there. Are we going to get a bet this week? We've agreed with each other on almost everything.
I don't know. Do you like Baltimore on Monday?
No, I don't.
All right. Well, then we're not going to get a bet out of that one. But Baltimore -1, -1.5. Total going up a little bit here to 47 for this one. And look, I mean, as a Browns fan, and I was too young for their playoff games in the late 80s and all of that. I mean, this is the best I've had it in my lifetime. And I'm trying not to take it for granted. And I want to bet I'm so bad here on Monday night. It's one of those games where you kind of wait for the carpet to be pulled out from under you. But, I mean, they're an underdog at home against the Baltimore team that just has had something wrong week in and week out. Is this just an obvious handicap to take Cleveland?
Ooh, I don't know, man. I mean, I can't get week 1 out of my head too much. 38-6 Baltimore. I guess I got too much Cleveland last 30 years in my mind, because, I mean, this is probably one of their biggest, considering it's Monday Night Football. To me, this is just a huge disappointment that we don't get a full stadium. I mean, you would have a great environment in Cleveland on Monday Night Football if that was a full sold-out crowd. I think one's fair. I mean, keep in mind, look at line was Baltimore by 3. Both teams overachieved, so I don't think you're getting a huge discount here on the Browns.
It's funny. I wish I could remember who said it so I could give them credit for it. But they tweeted after the first half of the Browns game, they're like, "Give Cleveland the vaccine first because we're going to the Muni lot next week for tailgating for the Browns game." And I mean, it would be an epic day. In the Muni lot, in the pit, in all the lots around Cleveland Browns, their First Energy Stadium, whatever the hell it's called now. It's a shame that it has to be watered down like this. And in fact, too, Ohio with a 10 p.m. curfew. So you can't even go to the bar and watch the game because you have to
I didn't know that.
Pretty much around halftime.
So the virus knows when it's 9:45 and not 10:15?
I guess so.
I know that's political. I'm sorry.
So, but it's such a bummer. And of course now, everyone's saying, well, small group spikes, people are going to get together to watch the game at someone's house, no mask, whatever. But the thing of it is, I mean, look, the one thing I could say in Cleveland's defense is in that first game, they didn't have a preseason with Kevin Stefanski. Baker on, his third head coach in the NFL in 4 seasons or whatever.
Good point. Great points.
And Harbaugh's teams are always ready for the season, whether it's blowing people out in the preseason or an ass kicking in week 1. These two teams are in very different spots right now. And I think what concerns me is that the Browns don't open a favorite. And I know that last week their line against Tennessee was kind of influenced by their weak strength of schedule, and then money came in on game day, and that, or just in advance of the game. That kind of scared me a little bit. Maybe the same thing happens here. Maybe the Browns take game day money. I look at this team, and I look at how efficient the offense has been since OBJ got hurt. The fact that Baker, is taking great care of the football. They're running the offense the way it's designed. They're healthier now, and they do need to get Wyatt Teller off the COVID list. That will be very important for this game. The thing that scares me is, their defense. But Lamar Jackson's passing has regressed so much this year that the secondary losses for the Browns may not be that big of a deal. So, I don't know, man. They're well coached. They believe in Stefanski. They love Stefanski, especially after what they've gone through. It's not a homer pick. I got to take Cleveland. I don't know if they're one of my 5 for the circa, but I just, with the momentum.
Sounds like it with your presentation. I'd be very disappointed if you didn't take Cleveland out at this point.
See, here's the thing. The Browns would make the playoffs and win a playoff game, and they'd lose this week and take me out of the money in the circa, and it would just have to be that Cleveland experience in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I hear you. I feel you on that.
I'm jaded. I'm cynical. I'm largely dead inside for the most part, but I'm just happy to see meaningful football in December that's not from Ohio State. I guess that's the best way I can put it.
Well said. Yeah, I'm trying to think. You said in your lifetime at the start of it that it's been as good as the Browns been. Yeah, it's almost. I'm too young also to remember. I remember some of the Bernie Kosar. It's a very distant memory. I did tweet this out earlier this year. I remember the Browns beating the Cowboys at their apex, the Cowboys with Jimmy Johnson, and they won in Dallas. That was the Cleveland team that went to the playoffs in '94. That was probably my apex as a Browns fan.
I mean, the peak of my childhood with the Browns was winning the Super Bowl with QB Browns on Tecmo Super Bowl. Like, I mean, that's kind of all. That's kind of all I had.
Yeah.
It's just it's good to see it. I mean, I'm sure listeners can hear it in my voice too. That it's just good to have a football team that looks like they know what the hell they're doing on Sundays. Like I tell people all the time, my wife and I, we used to go grocery shopping on Sunday afternoons, or go run errands, or just anything not to sit down and watch the Browns and just be pissed off about it. And now I got to watch them. And it's going to be easy here on Monday Night Football with the Browns, 3 of their next 4 games in primetime, which, again, something I never thought I'd really see in my lifetime here. But a lot of good thoughts, a lot of good insights, lots of fun here on today's show with Brad Powers, professional bettor and handicapper from BradPowersSports.com. And, Brad, what's happening over at the website right now, man?
Talk about it each week. It's my newsletter. Every single college game, every single NFL game. You can get it. My power ratings, computer projected lines, trends, bad beats, you name it. $49 for the rest of the season. It's available. It's called my Powers Picks newsletter, and it's available at BradPowersSports.com.
Great resource. I use it myself. Definitely something that I enjoy looking at, and I hope all of our listeners enjoy it as well. Brad, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much for joining me, and we'll talk to you again next week.
All right. Sounds good. Take care, my friend.
There you go. There's professional bettor and handicapper Brad Powers from BradPowersSports.com at Brad Powers and the number 7 on Twitter. Coming up on Friday, you know most of my circuit card already since I've talked about it here throughout the week on the show, but my picks, rationale, evidence, leans, everything like that for week 14 in the Circa Sports Million, 38, 26, and 1. Hopefully can keep that going here for week 14. That'll do it for me. Thank you so much for listening, everybody, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.